Welcome. We've got the greatest smile and points joining us tonight, Spencer Howard from Straight to the Points.
Hey, Stefan, how are you?
Well, I became aware today that we have some competition in the programming. So we
Yeah,
are travel. I generally say is political, but today it's the escapism.
there you go.
You as a former political organizer are actually
I know.
big
I
guest.
can't believe I'm skipping it, but I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay to talk about travel instead.
Let's do that. So you are based in the DC area,
I
and
am, yeah.
get us up to speed. How have you been handling the past 6 months, and what travel decisions are you making right now?
Past 6 months. Well, I guess it was. So I took a trip to Sri Lanka right as everything kind of went to hell, and came back early, and it's been kind of boring since then. I've traveled a little bit, but I don't really broadcast that because I worry there are too many people out there who will see me as a data point, as like, you can just travel freely and don't worry about anything and don't worry about precautions. And while I was, on the other hand, like wearing a mask constantly and staying outside and avoiding human beings, and like, there's a very big difference, I think, than just kind of throwing caution to the wind. But yeah, it's been a pretty tame 6 months, which is unusual for people like us.
Yeah, you're one of those characters that I am more likely and have been more likely to see you in a place like Hong Kong than your home region. What have you
Yeah.
learned about the DC region that
Nothing. I sit and
yeah.
stare out my window. No, no. It's I always I get comments from friends on Instagram where it's like I always post a picture of like the parking lot view from my window.
Yeah.
It's almost a daily thing. I'm like, and here's what I'm doing today. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting in DC. Like, I think in the early part of this, people weren't really taking it seriously, and then in the last, say 4 months, people have really started to take it seriously, and so you see a lot of people in masks. They're going to restaurants that are outdoors, small groups. There's a brewery close to me that I go to pretty regularly and just sit outside, and they've got everything spaced and staff are wearing masks. So it's it's a good spot. It's a good situation. It's just a kind of concerned about what's coming up in the in the later fall and winter, when sitting outside with friends isn't quite as feasible as it gets colder. So we'll see how the city handles it then. I think most places are kind of waiting to see how that goes.
Absolutely. And my trip was actually last trip was to DC, the Travel and Adventure show that
Yeah.
March, and I did a few days before that. I did have just a little bit of time to travel in the region. I spent a few days in Fredericksburg, and I mean, I knew there was history all over, certainly Virginia and that, but the immediate suburbs or greater DC area, the amount of sites I wanted to see and didn't have time made me resolve that next time I have a DC trip, that I'm going to base myself outside of the downtown core and explore so many of these incredible spots that you could visit from downtown, but being based outside and with the car, and like the National Museum of the United States Marine Corps, that was an incredible spot. I assume the opening of the National Museum of the United States Army was delayed, but that had been scheduled to open in June, and so much history, presidential history, interests me. The ethnic eating scene that's been covered by Tyler Cowen. So I think DC suburbs, when I get back to traveling, will be a big destination of interest.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things out in the suburbs when it comes to food. And if you like the Civil War, you can kind of work your way south into Virginia and like make it down to Richmond. Not that you like the Civil War, but if you're interested in that time period,
that's right. You are a Southern boy, so please explain that part of the United States to me.
Yeah, right. But my father's like spent a lot of time growing up in Richmond and Fredericksburg, Virginia. So I used to hear about him. Like he talks about when he was a kid, he'd like, be playing out on what were like battlefields, just like, running around as a kid in a field, but it just happens to have some like significance that you wouldn't really think about as a child. So there's a lot of stuff that's obviously happened in Virginia. So I think it's worth a trip. I think Richmond, about 2 hours drive south of DC is always worth a trip. So lots in the region that people don't think about.
If
Though I think
people are
DC.
choosing, and I've not properly visited either Richmond or Charlottesville.
I'm sorry.
I haven't properly visited either. If people have to choose one, Richmond or Charlottesville.
I mean, I'd probably go with Richmond, but I also lived there right out of college, so I'm a little biased. I've liked going to Charlottesville. It's very nice. It's just, I really do like Richmond.
Fantastic. Well, local staycation travel is not not where you made your name and claim to fame.
No, it's really not.
About award alerts. So
oh man, the newsletter. Yeah, it's been a little quiet this month. But yeah, I guess 2+ years ago, I think I made a joke on Twitter about finding like one business class seat on like Air New Zealand from LAX to London throughout the entire schedule. And I think I made some joke about how I should just like send out an email whenever I find something interesting, and a bunch of friends emailed me and were like, no, really, you should please do that. We would love to know. So just kind of on a lark decided to, set up a newsletter. I didn't know anything about newsletters. I still feel like I barely know anything about newsletters. I'm just trying to provide something that's useful to people. So since then I've been able to send out, I don't even know how many, 80+ newsletters with business and first class award space, specifically internationally. I'm generally trying to send someone over an ocean, occasionally South America, but generally Europe, Asia, Australia. I think I've done South Africa, Middle East. So yeah, just trying to help people who want to travel in style, as I like to put it. And generally for people who are looking for, 2, 4, 6 seats in like business class or something, since can be very tough, though not as tough right now, to find award space.
So actually, I'll pause the question I was going to ask and just say, for people that are really beginner at miles, they've been traveling, so they have some miles, but why is there a need for this service? And I've shared the link, your award alerts. It's a free service that everybody says you should be charging for, but it is
maybe
free.
one day. Why should people care? I mean, I think a lot of it just comes down to like, how much time and energy do you have in any given day or in the week? Like, there's so many people with busy jobs and family lives and hobbies and friends, and like, while searching for award space is something I do for fun, I recognize that that's probably not most people's idea of like a relaxing Saturday afternoon, or something they want to do after a long day at work, or after they've worked and put the kids to bed and done the whole, that's just not necessarily what everybody's excited to be doing. So,
and why is award space? I mean, it seems like for somebody that comes to this from the outside, there's websites, it should be easy to figure out a frequent flyer ticket. Why is it a tough thing to find? Not necessarily just availability, but the technology, the data sources. Why is it tough to even know, is this flight I want available?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. I imagine some that deal with actual airlines and how they feel about, their programs. But I think part of it's just that some of these platforms aren't, and how are you supposed to know that if you're just like, a casual flyer who has Alaska miles, why would you know that you can't find a Cathay Pacific award ticket on Alaska's site? Why would you think that I need to search with American or British Airways and then call Alaska and then hope that they actually see the space, because they don't actually see as much as other partners? So like, there's no reason for like a normal person to know any of that. And it's only, so a lot of it's just from like trial and error. Like, you try something, you find out, like someone had to notice that first. It wasn't like Alaska Airlines was like, hey, we don't show that online, you need to go search with one of our competitors and then call us. And like, that's why I always say, when people like, I guess they think about you or, Tiffany Funk at 1 Mile at a Time, or anyone, it's just like, oh, how do you know so much? Like, and it seems like you must know everything, but like, a lot because you've tried a lot of things. Tiffany knows a lot because she's done a lot of things. Like, there's just no way to run into it all. And at some point, someone can probably tell you something that you didn't realize because you just haven't like stumbled into that issue at some point. So
That
that's
really
just,
puts me in place in Yoda turns. I try, and Tiffany does.
yeah. Tiffany's brilliant. I always say she's one of the smartest people we have in our little miles and points and travel space. And yeah, so
She
Team
is
Tiffany over here.
I recommend our chat with her some months ago. Have to get her back, but
Yeah, absolutely.
for somebody who's very beginner, just how do you? I always struggle with this of they have miles in a few airlines maybe, but this concept of partners and partners of partners. You hinted at Alaska and Cathay. I mean, how do you use? I mean, you were in political advocacy in a prior iteration of your career. You were communicating complicated policy ideas to people, which defy easy explanation and resonance. How do you get somebody to connect the dots and understand this idea that you have Alaska miles, but you can use them to book Cathay flights, but you can't send them to Cathay and have Cathay book flights. You got to book through Alaska, and it seems like it just ties people in knots.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, a lot of times you get questions of like, can I transfer these airline miles to this airline? And there's always that conversation of like, you're not talking about Avios, so no. And I assume most people are familiar, but like British Airways, Iberia, Aer Lingus, all in the Avios program, and you can transfer between them. But like, that's not what people are thinking about. They're thinking about like Delta, and they want to fly KLM or Air France. And so they think that they need to move the miles there. And I think we're just not used to, paying with, in a sense, like one currency for something to book something that has its own other currency. I mean, it's kind of like paying dollars in Europe or something. Like you need to be using euros. You need to like change the dollars into euros so that you can actually use the cash. And I think we kind of think a lot like that. And that's just part of it, is just kind of decoupling that idea that you have to use the same, like you have to use the one airline's program as opposed to just paying on your own with something else. And it's just part of it's just learning the fact that partners exist, and it doesn't usually take that long once people kind of know that that's a thing. It's just a matter of someone cueing them into it. Yeah, it's just again, it's something you have to learn something to even kind of move forward. And I think that's why there's obviously a lot of great blogs out there who try to like simplify these things. There's, people like me who just answer questions on Instagram, like whenever someone DMs me, like, whatever it is. And like, it's just a matter of kind of getting that information out there, and in front of people's eyes. And that's the challenge.
And you've over time contributed two blogs in particular that have some of the most dedicated, demanding in a good way, high expectation readership. God Save the Points and 1 Mile at a Time. Talk about writing and that for people that are interested in freelancing or taking up even a full-time writing job. What is it like to go into a website and write for something that has such a defined identity and passionate fan base? Well,
fortunately, that both like Gib from God Save the Points and Ben and Tiffany over at OMAD are just great to work with, so that helps. Like they were always super supportive of anything that I was working on. It's definitely, I mean, it's interesting when you freelance for someone else's site. Like people are used to a certain voice, people are used to what that person thinks and what that person writes about, and then you kind of come in and it like can change things up a bit. I think generally most people are pretty welcoming. Like if you're putting in the effort, there's always going to be somebody who's like not happy with you. There is no like there's just no way to get around that. Like you get some nasty comments or the occasional email or something, but at the same time, I mean, from the way I always looked at it, I was like, you're never going to say anything worse than what I heard on the campaign trail. So it's cute when people think that they're like really hurting you. But it's there's generally no racial epithets, stuff like that. So pretty tame. I don't know. You're going to find someone who wants to call you out and show that they know more. And sometimes someone does know something you don't know, or sometimes you just make a dumb mistake, and like that happens. So can't be perfect, so you move on.
You mentioned answering a lot of questions on Instagram. That platform mystifies me. You seem to live there, and every time somebody sends me a message, I try to remember on the latest version where I can find the message box. Certain things are just intuitive for people, and others are just not. And that platform I've really struggled with, and part of it is I haven't forced myself to really enjoy. So and I've always felt that points is a subject that's hard to communicate in the more simple or in brevity. That more long form articles, you've written some very long award guides, for instance, on the sites we mentioned, where these are heavily screenshotted text. How do you find communicating this on this more constrained platform like Instagram?
I don't get quite as in depth, obviously, but I also don't think people are on Instagram to get an in-depth article. Mm-hmm. Sometimes all I'll do is you can use like carousel posts, so you can have like 10 photos, and you can create things on like Canva, and so you can actually have like a photo, but then like a text-based photo, and you can kind of write more by using that as people kind of swipe through and read. I think you get like 2,200 characters in the caption, so it isn't. I think that comes out to around 300 words or something. So it's not a ton of space, but I try to kind of get people thinking more than I think. I try to give like in-depth explanations. Like when I write a newsletter about some award space that's out there, I provide kind of insights and like best ways to book based on which points you have and which miles you have and why you might consider one option versus the other. I don't get into that necessarily in an Instagram post. It's just there's just not enough time and or not enough space, but I also don't think people are kind of scrolling through Instagram looking for the in-depth. So ideally people will follow up with questions, and they'll ask them in the comments, or they'll send me a direct message, and I pretty much try to answer everyone that I get. Occasionally I'll look at somebody's message and then forget that I've seen it, and then I'll feel bad about it, but generally I answer every single one. So unless it's like spam or somebody telling me how to get 100,000 Instagram followers or the new Bitcoin move, I really have very little interest in those.
I could use 100,000. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, so great. Yeah, if for the low cost of $10,000.
Is that what it costs? I
have no idea. There's always some kind of
I would assume it costs a lot of money, and the algorithms are smart enough to catch up faster and faster, and those numbers might melt away pretty quickly. But I really just don't.
I'm not really concerned with like vanity metrics. I'd rather actually help somebody who's real than talk to some bots.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Facebook groups. So you're involved in Facebook groups as well?
Yeah, 10X Travel.
Tell us about 10X Travel.
Yeah, it's about 60,000 people now. When I started with them about 4 or so years ago, it was 1,000 people. So times have changed. We still have open posting, which makes it kind of crazy sometimes.
Wow.
We just, we tell people that you can post what you want, and we'll delete it if it's like against one of the group rules, or, I mean, the biggest one is like be nice. If you're not going to be nice, then we're just going to delete it. Like, sorry. That's well, not really that sorry, but that's, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I this is something you learn in politics. Like, it's really easy if you're not in person to like say horrible things or mean things to people. But the moment you set foot in front of them, like in person, everyone becomes very quiet. And so I used to tell people, you don't want to make phone calls. You want to go door to door, because it's so much harder for someone to just start screaming in your face when they see you. So I think with Facebook communities, you just kind of have to, you kind of know that you're like, you're not in person. They can't even hear you. You're just this little like avatar to them. Like, you're not a real human. So when people get mad, one, don't take offense to it. But also, if you think you can just keep doing that, you just kind of got to get rid of it, because it just creates a messy environment. So we try to keep it friendly. We kind of joke that we're the anti-flyer talk. We're not going to like demand that you scroll 400 pages through comments to find the answer that was apparently mentioned up thread. But not that I don't love flyer talk. I've learned some things. I've made friends from flyer talk. But it's just, we're not, I mean, 10X is not the same as kind of the 1 mile at a time, the God Save the Points of the world. It's not really a blog in the truest sense. It's more of an educational site for people who have no idea when they're starting how to get into this whole like credit cards and points and stuff like that. We're trying to, in a much more personal way, kind of walk people through building a foundation. And I always joke that people kind of graduate from us. Like at some point, like we've helped them build a foundation. They will either decide they want to be kind of a casual points user, or they will get much more into it. They'll start reading like Doctor of Credit and Reddit and Flyer Talk and, you know, any other number of sites, and becoming part of like smaller private Facebook groups, or, you know, just meeting new friends and talking with them. Like that's just, you know, that's just part of what some people decide to do when they get into points. We're just very much focused on helping people build that foundational knowledge so that each piece that they're learning later becomes a little bit easier to learn.
What are the first few pieces that somebody should learn?
Understanding credit scores. And like, you know, if you can't handle not spending more money than you have, credit cards are not for you. At that point, just don't even bother. But then it's just like, we do kind of lay out the, you know, how transferable points programs work, which I think are vital. Learning airline partnerships and alliances and stuff like that. And, you know, even getting into kind of like understanding how award space works and like being flexible so that, you know, it's not like award space is not, that doesn't exist there because you want it on that particular date, that particular time. And like, oh, I want the nonstop. And I'm like, that's great. Who doesn't? Unless you're somebody, I guess, who's weird, kind of like me, who enjoys flying for the sake of flying, and I'm willing to stop wherever. But yeah, we're just trying to make it digestible.
In flying for the sake of flying, before you even mentioned that, I was going to say, I mean, the first thing you mentioned was credit cards. And if we were having this interview 10 years ago, you are an av geek, aviation geek. You would have been flying to earn miles. Is there any flying to earn miles for you anymore? Does it make sense with any of the programs?
I don't really fly to earn miles. Like I'll book a fare deal, just because like, oh, I'd really like to go wherever it is, and I'd like to fly that particular aircraft or airline, or try something new, whatever. I mean, I'll do that. But I'm not like, it's generally not a rational move for me. If I'm like if I'm trying to justify it and like, oh, I earn all these miles, and I'm like, yeah, but there's a credit card over there that would have like earned you 3 times that for a lot less. So, you know, but yeah, I mean, I'm all about, if like you want to budget for travel, like spend what you budget for. If that's like, if you've budgeted for it and you can pay for it, whatever, and you want a certain experience and that'll get you the experience you want, like I'm all about it. I don't think there's like one way to do it. I think sometimes once you get into points, there's this kind of, I don't know, almost an anxiety about spending money to travel, because so many people, I think, kind of emphasize like not spending money to travel, when the goal isn't to not spend money necessarily. It's to be able to travel. And if points can help you do that, like great. But I'm not going to like, you know, begrudge someone for wanting to go somewhere and finding the perfect route for them and spending some money on it. So I think that's just, but yeah, to your main point, I don't really fly to earn miles or status, but I just stumble into some of it sometimes. So.
And what is the flying you like to do for fun?
Business and first class internationally. Put me on the longest flight possible. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
What are the products that you really love? The airline seats. I mean, you can go full geek here.
No, I mean, like finally, I don't know why. I always seem to have something booked, but I finally flew Q Suites in March, right before everything fell apart, on their A350 1000. What's that? Q Suites, the Qatar Airways business class. Yeah, the Q Suites.
That's the best business class in the world, people argue now? Is that
people now? I guess people now say that ANA's new The Room is the best, but this was amazing. I was super impressed with it. For business class, I was so excited about it. Now I really want to fly ANA's new business class product just to compare it. But like that's a lot of fun. And I I don't know. I also love KLM. I'm not shy about that. I'm like a KLM fanboy. I just
Really?
find them to be very friendly. I
Wow.
know. No, I'm the only one. It's fine. They serve cheese as a snack, and that's like the way to my heart.
Okay, the cheese, but
So,
all the other food, in my experience, have been more economy than business. I've had both on KLM, but
yeah.
it's some unusual cuisine choices, and I
Yeah.
assume that reflects Dutch cuisine, but that's it hasn't been the ones that leap to my palate's delight.
No, and I won't say that it's like the food that does it. I just have found the crews to be quite friendly.
Ah, okay, yeah.
And they just, I mean, I know people like to kind of rant about terrible crews, but I feel like a lot of a lot of it's the input and like how you kind of approach engaging with a crew really impacts how you're going to be treated, which is not unlike, you know, living
Mm.
any other part of your life. So I feel like I'm always very friendly and they're always very friendly to me. So, you know, I've just had really great interactions with them. And how do you not like those little blue Delft houses? I have like 3 of them back here.
You're what,
Love
six
those things.
6'3", 6'2", and you're probably the median height on a KLM flight.
Yeah, yeah, 6'3". I feel, and that's what I love. You know, everybody's my height. I'm not quite as freakishly tall.
Yeah, it's a great point that I feel like any KLM flight experience I've had, the crowd, the crew looks like they're proud to be there, and I felt like when Delta got there, you know, I realized there's been issues with some allergies that have come out and such, but the passport plum, the purple uniforms, I felt like,
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it really made a difference in how you saw how a lot of employees just looked more proud to be there in a handsome
yeah,
suit for the gents and the there are multiple iterations for both men and women. I really
yeah.
it did seem
It's
to, you could just see them looking at the other airlines in the U.S. and it's just some very worn out, generic looking bland style for the most part of the U.S. airline uniforms, and Delta just they seem to walk with their heads a little bit higher when those came out.
yeah. They're also just, you know, less exhausted because they're on time more. But yeah, I mean, like, I mean, KLM. I mean, when I flew them in January, I flew their 787-10, like those new Dreamliner. I mean, they'd only had it briefly, and like the crew talked about it. They were just excited about it. Like you can kind of appreciate those kinds of things. But yeah, I think that's just one of my like quirky loves of flying is KLM. But Q Suites is great. There's a lot of other wonderful ones. It's really hard to like. I have a hard time saying like, oh, this business class or this first class is like subpar or bad. And I'm like,
Mm.
you know, just because it's not number one in the world doesn't mean it's bad. Like I'm still lying down. I can like drink champagne. I can, you know, truly relax and have a fun time. And especially when you're with friends, especially when you're with friends who haven't tried something before and you can share that experience with them. I think it's a lot of fun.
Oh, superb. Yeah, and I think it's a great perspective, and put all the more into perspective this year when
Yeah.
so many of us were so used. But yeah, the first time I flew KLM business class, I tried to open that house. I didn't know what it was for, and then I didn't. I gave up, and then the passenger next to me said, "Oh, can I have it?" And I said, "I don't care." And now I realized there are these big
Little did you
collectors.
know.
Yeah,
Little did you know.
I arrive in Amsterdam, and they've got a framed case of these collector's items in the
Yeah.
KLM lounge.
Have you been to the new lounge with the restaurant and all that stuff?
I was just going to ask
In
if
Amsterdam?
I've been to the old lounge because so many
Okay.
times I'm a Delta flyer, so of course
Yeah.
many, and I would always book these like 8 hour layovers, and it would always be okay. This time I'm going to have the energy to go into the city, and then it would
Oh
always just
no.
be, it'd be noon, and it would just be pitch dark out and pouring rain, and I just and be tired from some 10 hour flight. And I just it's like I've
It's a
spent a
bit
lot of
much.
time in that lounge where they you take a number to wait for the shower, and it was like your number 79 on the list, and so tell me
Yeah.
about the new one.
It still gets very crowded, but I do love the escalators up where they have like a wall of these blue Delft houses,
Oh wow. Oh,
which I think is just really fun. It's very nice. It does get very crowded still. Like there's just no way around that. It gets very crowded. I had to wait quite a while for a shower when I was there in January. But there was definitely a lot of seating, which is nice. They've got a nice little Heineken bar, of course, as you would expect. Um, Yeah, it was, I mean, all in all, nice experience. And they've got the new like Blue by KLM restaurant, which is a pay restaurant.
Okay.
So it's I guess kind of giving you like a first class experience in a business class lounge, which is why I guess they're having you pay for it. I actually tried it just to see what it was all about.
Mhm.
Staff were super nice. It was not very crowded. I was there for breakfast. Food was good. And then there's also a like that's an upstairs section, and then across from that there's a bar, and both have little kind of, it's not really like if you've been in Zurich at the Swiss lounge, business class lounge or whatever, where you can go out on the deck and like hang out above the tarmac. Like it's not quite that nice, but there is like a place outside where you can go and
Hmm.
look at planes. But yeah, it's a nice little spot.
So which airline lounges in the world would you deliberately go, let's say, 4 hours early to the airport for?
It's a good question. I really enjoyed the Etihad First Lounge, but it's been a while since I've been there, and I know they've made a lot of cuts, so I don't really know what the situation in Abu Dhabi is. I actually just rebooked an Etihad Apartments flight for late summer next year, so I'll find out. We'll see how it's doing. What other ones have I enjoyed? I mean, Cathay Pacific has, I don't know, the pier is it's just fun. I don't know. I just enjoy it in Hong Kong.
Hmm.
Um, Other lounges. I
What is
mean,
it
there were
about
tons
Hong
of.
Kong for you?
What is it about Hong Kong? Well, I have some friends there, so that helps. So that's all. It's just a nice excuse to visit them. But the food is fun. It's always better when someone like you is there with me, so that you can figure out what I should be eating. I just like to go with the recommendations of those who have much more experience with the cuisine.
And
Uh,
some of those don't let you have a say or a choice.
what's that? Sorry.
And some of those don't let you have a say or a choice
Yeah.
anyways in what you're going to eat.
Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it's just like there's a lot of energy to the city. I know I've heard some people say like it's too much, but I don't know. I think it's great. I love it. Whether it's just kind of walking along the harbor, or I mean, even doing the touristy thing and going up to Victoria Peak and all that stuff. Like I don't know. It's just a cool city. There's a lot of
Yeah.
energy to it.
People
I
think
don't know what it's gonna.
I mean, it has these incredible hiking trails, the outlying islands that are just minutes away by easy ferry, and it's. I learned to appreciate that when I spent a semester there. That it does feel certainly too much to begin with, and then you realize all these people. I mean, it never gets colder than about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and yet they
Yeah.
have hiking poles and North Face jackets and all
Yeah.
that for their weekend.
They're prepared. They're
Yeah.
prepared. But yeah, I don't know. I love the energy. I know there's been a lot of turmoil there recently. I hope that it ends up working out okay, so that people can continue to visit, and obviously for the people who live there themselves. But yeah, it's always been a fun place. I feel like I've been there something like 5 times in the last like 3 or 4 years or something. I don't know. It seems like it's an annual trip, which I feel like you do. I feel like you end up there at least once a year as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few times we've
So
missed a year, but try to be annual. And yeah, what
yeah,
an incredible, energizing place I find.
yeah,
Just even when I don't have a specific business connection, being in a place with such energy and buzz, it really motivates. And the food we're huge fans of, and that's the
yeah.
only trip we still have ostensibly on the books for late this year. I don't see any
Okay.
possibility it's going to happen, but it is one of those creative one ways from Vancouver to Hong Kong to LA that I'm loath to give up.
Oh, somehow you have to find a way. I know exactly what you're
Oh, yeah,
talking
I booked
about.
it March 31st when it was disappearing, and I mean, I don't. Do they?
Yeah,
I mean, in that case, are they? I assume if it cancels, they'll be happy to refund.
yeah.
But in terms of date
You're
change,
not gonna.
it sounds like
I
that's
don't
not.
think that's gonna happen.
That's
That's my guess, but that's
I
my
want
guess.
the date
But
change.
I mean, but I totally understand. Like, I don't know, you connect with a place, you really enjoy the food, or maybe it's just the scenery. I mean, for me, I just love, like, similarly, I love the food in Singapore, the hawker centers.
Wow.
And like,
So
I mean, people always,
you're 50-50 like our friend Renee. That usually people
yeah,
it's a violent reaction against either
I
Hong Kong
know.
or Singapore in terms of their
It's,
passion in eating. You're down the
I
middle.
just, I, good food's good food, man. Like I'm not gonna, it's like I'm not gonna judge, but like I've been really fortunate to like get to know some people in Singapore, and when I show up, they'll take me to a different hawker center, and
Mhm.
while I try to like help order things, they just tell me to sit down and wait, and they go to a bunch of places and bring back a big table of food, honestly. But it's just fun to try things, and I know like Singapore has this reputation of being super expensive, and it really can be, but if you're trying to like eat, you don't have to go to like super fancy restaurant to have amazing food. And when you go to the hawker centers, it's very much affordable. And if you're staying at a hotel on points, even better. So
Yeah, it's certainly the eat. I mean, I felt that similar about Japan. I mean, it can be extremely expensive, but our last trip there, what, a year and a half ago, what, 2 weeks or a week or whatever. I mean, we never even thought to have sushi because we were so busy eating other
yeah,
stuff, and a lot of stuff. I mean, like the curry over
lots of good
rice,
food.
these things are very modest and delicious. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a sucker for good food. Maybe I just like to eat a lot, but like whether it's Thailand or my personal favorite, Taiwan, I still think that Taiwan is
ooh,
sorely underrated.
okay, give us the Taiwan sales
But
pitch,
the
because I do think it's underrated and overlooked, and it's maybe gotten a little more attention the past months for how well they have handled
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, I was when I was in Sri Lanka, I was joking with my friends who were there with me. I was like, I'm just gonna fly to Taiwan. They know how to deal with this stuff. Like, um, but I find people to be pretty friendly in a lot of places, but I found people in Taiwan to be particularly friendly. Both times I've been, I guess I always say I've been 2.5 times, like 2 real trips and then one very long layover when I ran into the city. But I just think it's a beautiful place, whether it's like walking around Taiwan or Taipei, and then going to the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial. The park is very beautiful. You can go out to, I probably butcher pronunciations, but Yangmingshan, the national like park. It's like I think it has like a natural spring involved, and you can hike up that and just relax during the day. And like, it's just, I don't know. I love that. But then you can go to the night markets and they're packed, which I think is great. I guess maybe not right now, but there's a bunch of fun food to try. I mean, even if you venture beyond like Taipei, you can take their high-speed rail down to like Kaohsiung in
Mhm.
the southern tip of the island, and you can find great food there. You can find just great places to walk around. I very much enjoy just walking around and seeing what places are like. I think it was, yeah, I believe it was Kaohsiung when I was there with my friend Tim, and I mean, I just dug around on sites like food bloggers who are based in Asia and found like this little, I don't know, hole in the wall place that truly was like, well, I was like, okay, I think we go down this road. And then it was just like, okay, this looks like a building that's not in use, but it looks like we walked through it. And like, you just kind of winding
Taiwan is one
through the
when we
streets.
said hole in the wall, that can be literal.
Yeah,
It's
fair enough. So
euphemism.
ended up, I mean, I don't even remember. It's like a pork bun of some kind, but I mean, it I mean, that was literally the only thing they served, and we just kind of showed up. They didn't speak English. We clearly only speak English, and it was just kind of like they knew what we wanted. We gave them the money. I mean, it was just like grabbing a burger basically, and it was wonderful. And it was like simple meal, but so good. Similarly, going up to like Chiayi, if you've seen Netflix Street Food Asia, that's
Okay.
features. There's an episode on Chiayi. Um, like had turkey rice, which it's as simple as it sounds,
Hmm.
and it's still great. So I went to the place that I saw in this like documentary episode, and you know, trying to think what else was it, fish head soup or something.
Mhm.
And the owner of that place, she featured pretty heavily in this documentary. And like while I'm sitting here with my friend Tim eating this, she like stops by and she's like, "How is everything?" And I was like, "Wait, hold on, I saw you on TV." I mean, it was great. Like it it's just there's just so I think so much food, so much culture, it's just so much to just kind of take in. And because it's not kind of the major like financial center the way Hong Kong or Singapore has been, like it just doesn't have the same international reach. like the first time I went there was a little girl who was like staring at me, and this woman who I found out was from Australia and who was her like exchange. She was an exchange student at one point in Australia, and this woman was like, she was like, "Don't worry, she just hasn't seen an American since Tom Cruise." And I was just like, but I mean, I guess I guess it's not a hot destination for Americans. But yeah, I just think it's a wonderful place.
That's awesome to hear. And sounds like you're not traveling too much, but you're still pulling on the points. And I do find myself losing interest. I mean, today I happened to notice in my Amazon account I had this. I don't go to Whole Foods really at all, but it was like spend $20 2 different days each, and then get a $20 credit, and then it stacks with this Prime offer for another 10. And I did it just because it's about an hour walk for me, and it's like it's an excuse to take a very long walk. And I
good reason.
This is all the point stuff I'm doing is $20 off groceries as an excuse to walk out in the nice weather. And
it's
what
I understand.
What deals have you been chasing?
Deals have I been chasing? Like earning points or like credit card perks and all that?
Creative redemptions.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, last night I rebooked an Etihad Apartments flight that I was supposed to take in March. I also same time rebooked an El Al flight. I had transferred points during an Amex transfer bonus last year, and I'd forgotten there was also a Qantas bonus, like when you transferred points in, and so it actually worked out in my favor because I got what was I think it was like 78,000 miles or something for a one-way in business, and I would need 90 now, and because I had transferred enough for the 78, I got the bonus of like 15,000 miles or something. So even though Qantas devalued, I still had enough to book that, book it again. So worked out. Dumb luck. What else have I been doing? I've been doing a lot of buying group stuff. So just, buying lots of little electronic things to send some of these buying groups and
give people the
around.
What are buying groups?
I call them like retail arbitrage folks at scale. They bring other people in to help them scale their businesses. So a lot of it's break even stuff. You buy stuff, earn points, and they basically reimburse you the cost. Some of them pay small commissions. Some people use cashback cards instead of points or miles, rewards earning cards, so that they're trying to make a cash profit, which is a whole nother thing if you want to get into taxes. So go talk to an accountant, not me. But yeah, just, while I'm sitting at home, if I can buy something, earn points, and, ship it off and sometimes make a little profit on top of it, why not? So
what's the biggest mistake you made in the buying groups reselling?
I'm trying to think if I've made a mistake on like anything that would bother me. I mean, it's like, oh, I should have used that card instead of this card, but that's about it. I'm pretty meticulous about making sure I'm checking.
Record keeping is key.
You really need to know, like, you need to be because like sometimes prices will change. They'll send out a deal and it'll be at X price, and you'll click through to the deal, and then it's actually a little bit different. And like, if you don't realize that, you'll end up losing some money.
That's happening with these Apple pre-orders right now as we speak, right? They're not shipping in time or something.
Yeah,
price. So.
I canceled a lot of Apple Watch orders today, and then reordered at the reduced price. But it was still a little frustrating to go back through. But that's how it goes. I mean, I think anybody who's like, "What's that?"
You're in deep if it's a lot of orders in one day that you have to redo.
Yeah. Well, it was enough. So it was, I'm trying to think, I think it was like $30,000 worth of Apple Watches or something. But I think anybody who gets into miles and points in a more intense way, like, understands that there's like always these opportunities, but like things can go wrong, and you need to kind of really think about your risk tolerance and, just what happens if things don't go right. And I mean, we know that from like the plastic merchant a couple years ago, when people were doing gift card reselling, similar concept, and he just disappeared. And there were people with tens of thousands of dollars that just vanished. So, you know, it's not to be taken lightly. I try to say that, like, you know, you really got to be on top of these things. It's not a casual points earning adventure, but you know, I'm obsessed. So this is what I'm doing. But yeah, other than that, I think I've booked some trips. I booked that TAP Portugal business class fare from Boston to the Azores with a stopover in Lisbon. That was like $640 round trip. I think like 100+ people booked that when I sent that to my newsletter. So that was exciting. Hopefully people will be able to do that trip, you know, next spring and summer. So yeah, just earning points, trying to book things for next year, give myself something to look forward to. That's the gist of it.
Well, we'll close with, they receive a fair deal from your award alert service. What do they need to do, and when do they need to do it? Or in other words, how fast do they act?
Yeah, I mean, so when I send out like a cash fair deal that can be booked with points or cash, like sometimes those go quickly. When it comes to like true award flights, if it's like Qantas first class, those things can go in like 2 hours. Other times, some airlines just kind of have a lot of space that stick around for a while. So it really varies. But, you know, if you have the points and you're looking for
Saunders is watching, he booked a Qantas first class award from your service.
Yeah.
By your alert.
Yeah.
Help us
understand a bunch of
these 24-hour cancel rules, or more generous, less generous. What are the gotchas and the current?
The gotchas.
We'll say from January onward, assuming that policies more or less revert to where they had been.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people it's like you've got 24 hours to make a decision. If you're booking in the U.S. and like a U.S. marketed fare, I know people like to play around with like going to different versions of Expedia, but you don't necessarily get the same protections if you're not booking something that's marketed in the U.S. I've seen that catch people out in the past.
It could be to or from the U.S. and marketed in the U.S.
Yeah. So I'm definitely someone who will book something and give myself 24 hours to think about it. But again, it's one of those things you want to be careful with. Like, if you think there's a chance you'll forget to go back and cancel if you can't do it, don't spend the $500 or $600, like, because then you're just gonna be really mad. With award flights, it's a little different. Like, there's, you know, ways to cancel and get the miles back, but that can be pricey depending on the program. So always read the terms of the program you're using. And like, I don't remember all the cancellation and change fees. So whenever I'm thinking about booking, I just give that a quick look just so I know if something happens. I think more than a lot of people, because I work remotely, I can like force a trip. Like, even if it's tough, I can like just work from wherever I am. But you know, especially if you're kind of tied to an office and you just can't get out of going into I guess you don't have to go to the office right now for a lot of people, but if in theory you can't leave the US or go somewhere else, like, you know, make sure you know what those change and cancellation fees are, because some of them can be like $200. So that's not fun. Yeah.
Fantastic. Everyone sign up for the award alert service. Spencer, it's straight to the point. Thank you for joining us tonight.